Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to talk about a little pre-debate prep coming up here in just a little bit. What Mike Pence needs to do tonight. In very short, he needs to be the articulate voice for conservatism that Donald Trump just isn't. And usually I say that politicians especially, need to tell stories. Pence doesn't need to tell stories. He needs to give facts, give numbers. I want specific fatality rates for every decade age group for COVID and just crush the entire premise of the Democrats on all of these topics. Police brutality, COVID, you name it. Trump needs to, Pence needs to just shower, just deluge of facts and figures and numbers tonight. That would be my suggestion. Tonight, coverage starts at 7 o'clock Eastern. We've got the debate. We're going to be airing it right here at 9 o'clock, and then stick around after. Jesse's going to be hosting, and Bill O'Reilly will be around with some post-debate analysis. I want to start here. Yesterday, in the year 1536, I'll give you a second to think about that. Like, I don't really have like a place in my brain for the year 1536. Right? I can go back to like 1770. It's like as far back as I can like visualize. 1536, William Tyndale. He was strangled and burned at the stake. Here's there's a photograph from that moment. 484 years ago, tied up, strangled at the stake, then burned. This is the man who knew Greek, and he translated the Bible into English for the very first time. The King James Bible was in 1611. So this is 100 years before the King James Bible. Very few people could read Greek or Hebrew. And then he was in England, and the Pope he's the head of the church in Italy. And he didn't like that. Tyndale didn't. So he translated the Bible and then smuggled it out to a bunch of people. His famous words were, if God spare my life, I will cause a boy that drives the plow to know more of the scripture than you. Speaking to the Pope. I'll cause a boy that drives a plow to know more of the scripture than you do. And he paid for it with his life. His last words were, Lord, open the King of England's eyes. So I share that story. It happened yesterday, 484 years ago. But I share it because this clip from MSNBC, I can't get over it. I cannot get over this clip here. So this is Trump arriving to the White House, and then he took his mask off. Okay, I want to be clear. There's no other context to this there's no other context that could even make this clip like reasonable in any way. But there's no other context to this. He didn't do anything else. He got there, took his mask off. Here's what the MSNBC host said.
I want to echo, I think what can only be described as the shock. I think that we all feel there are moments in this job when you realize that you're witnessing some of the great horrors of history.
The great taking off. Like she's acting like Trump got off the helicopter and just opened fire and just started killing political prisoners. Just like right in front of the camera. Like the great horrors in history. We can pick an infinite number of horrors in history. I mean, that's why I just picked the Tyndale one, because that's a horror that happened, yesterday in world history. Right? So to say that Trump is taking off his mask is one of the great horrors in history, I'm going to put it very, very nicely, is lacking perspective. And when you lack perspective, and when you're a narcissist, then you live a life in perpetual fear. If you lack perspective, you live a life in fear, and fear robs you of joy. And I think that's the state of our country today. Let me quote John MacArthur on this. He said, fear is a liar. Fear lies to you. Fear tells you your future's not under control. That's a lie. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. You've got enough trouble today. Deal with that. God will be there in the future. Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Don't cripple the present by worrying about the future. You destroy your joy and you lose the present. My argument is that we live in such a godless culture. People are walking around in a constant state of internal unrest, and then that leads to external unrest on an individual level, right? So if you have internal unrest constantly all the time because you're worried about the future, so you have internal unrest, then you're going to make bad decisions and you're going to have a bad attitude and things are not going to go well in your life. So externally, you'll have unrest. And then when we live in a country with millions of people with internal and external unrest, then we become a country in a constant state of unrest. And just log on to Twitter to see that in action. Yesterday, we showed the tweet from Michael Beschloss. He's a presidential historian, author of 10 books, PBS NewsHour documentarian. And he talked about news contributor. And he talked about how we never have presidents get up on balconies. That's for authoritarian strongmen. And then people are just posting pictures of every single president ever on the balcony of the White House, right? That's a presidential historian who lacks perspective. Does it make sense? So people lack an eternal perspective. And when you don't believe in God or heaven or hell, then this world is all you have. And that's a very different worldview than a Christian's gonna have, right? You're gonna have you have a different worldview, which we talked about yesterday, and you're gonna have very different thoughts, and you're gonna have very different actions about whether you believe there's an eternity or you don't. I mean, that's like one of the most fundamental, drastic worldview differences you could possibly have. So that's eternal, but then even in the moment, right? So 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, for this light momentary affliction. That's Paul. All right, Paul knew affliction, and he called it this light momentary affliction is preparing us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. How about that for a life-changing perspective? All the difficult things that we experience in our life are but light and momentary afflictions. So to call what Trump did yesterday, where he took his mask off, one of the great horrors of history, that doesn't even compute. I don't even, Trump taking his mask off when he got to the White House, if you're to rank the great horrors, right? You're gonna rank them out. Trump taking off his mask doesn't rank as in the top 1 million great horrors of yesterday. I'm not being serious. Think about yesterday, just around the world, just murder, child abuse, verbal abuse, domestic abuse, someone jaywalking, and Trump takes his mask off. I think it might be the 1 millionth most horrific thing that happened yesterday. And we're supposed to be, I can't. Just CBS News reporter said he felt safer when he reported in North Korea than he does in the White House today. It's like, people, come on. And we don't even have to go back in time. We don't have to go back 484 years ago to William Tyndale. Do you know what's going on? Do you know what's going on in Myanmar today? So the Social Dilemma documentary that I talked about the other day, you have to watch it. It's fantastic. But Myanmar, Burma, Facebook is the internet, right? So you live in Myanmar and you get your cell phone and Facebook is already preloaded, and that's how you get to the internet, is through Facebook. And that's by, obviously, Facebook's design. So Dave Madden, he made a presentation to Facebook in May of 2015 about how Facebook was being used the Buddhists in Myanmar were using Facebook to organize and kill, slaughter, and commit genocide against Muslims. And this was in 2015. And Facebook, we're horrified and we're gonna take this very seriously. And then Dave Madden went back in 2017 and said, I don't know what you guys have been trying to do, because whatever it is not working because it's getting worse. Now, I wanna emphasize again, these are Buddhists, okay? These are Buddhists. So it's all the critical race theorists talking about white supremacists, blah, 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 blah. These are Buddhists gathering together to kill Muslims, and it's happening right now. Today. It's been going on for 5+ years. Today. I've never heard of it. Have you ever heard of it? Have you ever heard of Myanmar? Have you ever heard of the Myanmar Muslim genocide happening today? I haven't even heard of that. They think it's over 35,000 deaths. Almost 1 million Muslim refugees have had to flee. Myanmar, it's like next to Thailand and Laos and Vietnam and India, kind of like that neck of the wood. Almost 1 million Muslim refugees have had to flee. Entire Muslim villages destroyed, burned to the ground. That's medieval stuff. Pillaged, girls raped. It's believed 18,000 girls have been raped. the preferred method of killing people is throwing them into fires. This is right now. I don't know what time it is in Myanmar today, right at this moment, but this is happening right now. And MSNBC calls Trump taking off his mask one of the great horrors of history. Do you see how insane this is? And do you see how the media is fomenting all of this? People are scared and afraid and fearful and acting like it's the worst time ever to be alive, and Trump is a fascist dictator. Like, I will never get over people complaining that Trump is a fascist. And it's like, guys, you can't scream and yell that the leader of your country is a fascist if he's a fascist. He'll kill you. You're dead. Like, that's it. You can't yell it twice. And the media is just pushing this all day long, and people are falling for it because people lack perspective. Like if people had proper perspective, and someone said, and I mean that eternally, right? Proper biblical perspective, proper spiritual perspective, proper historical perspective, proper emotional perspective, then the media would come in here and say, oh, he's a fascist dictator, and this is one of the great horrors of history. And everyone would be able to bring up, oh, like, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about, that's not a great horror. Like, if they have perspective about COVID, they'd be like, oh, well, I mean, it's not that bad. I mean, it's 95% of 70-year-olds who get it survive. I mean, right? People are completely lacking perspective, and then everyone freaks out. Perspective brings calm. If you don't have perspective, you can't compare it to anything. So everything's the worst ever. And that's what narcissism does too, right? If you're narcissism, you're living within yourself and you can't see other people. So everything that you're experiencing is you're the only person who's ever experienced it. It's the worst thing ever in the history of the world. So if you're a narcissist, you can't have empathy. And if you're a narcissist historically, you have nothing to compare the present moment with. And you don't even have to be like a story in like an epic history. You can just compare Trump taking off his mask with the Black Lives Matter rallies of tens of thousands of people. And so they compare, and like that's hypocritical. But then you compare Trump taking off his mask with the mass genocide that's taking place right now in Myanmar. And that just gives you a little perspective. And I hope the perspective brings peace. And that's the goal right now. That's what I need more than anything, is I need some peace from the absolute hysteria. I'm not gonna let them manipulate me anymore. The chief investment officer at UBS Global Wealth Management, just last week, said that gold may hit $2,000 by the end of the year. It's at $1,800 right now. The head of real asset strategy at Wells Fargo said you got to buy gold. They're predicting $2,300 per ounce. And then Bank of America just said that gold may hit $3,000 by the end of the year. So whether it's $2,000, $2,300, $3,000, whatever, the consensus is it's going up. And yesterday, the federal government talking about a $2.4 trillion stimulus package. What do you think this is going to end well for the dollar? Think the dollar is going to hold up throughout all this? Not a chance. Trump sent one tweet yesterday, and the stock market tanked. We need something more real than this. Get gold, own gold, have it in your hand. And then, so there's that, more long-term, but then also, geez, if things hit the fan, it's good to have gold in your possession. Patriot Gold Group, they are America's highest rated precious investment firm, rated by Consumer Affairs, Retirement Living, A+ Better Business Bureau, AAA Business Consumer Alliance, 5 stars from Consumer Affairs, 4 years running. They're absolute first class, best of the best. There's no one better. Let's do this now. 28 days till the election, something like that, right? This is, do it now. Own gold. Give them a call, you get a free investor's guide. Any question you have, a human being is gonna pick up the phone. 1-800-798-4260. Tell them you listen to True Story, Mike Slater, and they're gonna treat you right, I promise you. 1-800-798, the number right there at the bottom of the screen, 1-800-798-4260. It's Patriot Gold Group. Hey, Slater Crusaders, yesterday on Jesse's show, he said, we are so fat, rich, and bored, we panic over anything now. And then he put on his Twitter, he said, America is the millionaire with a flat tire on his Rolls Royce, cursing the sky and screaming, why me, God, why me? And that guy's in for a rude awakening when problems, actual problems, finally come his way. And that's where we are in America today. So listen, this, the hypocrisy is just way too much to handle, but it's more than that now. Once it gets into the gaslighting, that's when it's when it's totally out of control. So real quick on the hypocrisy, we have a billion examples of this, right? But we went all summer with the left telling us that we need to lock down and all this stuff, right? So then we do. And then we have these Black Lives Matter rallies all over the place and they're no problem whatsoever. Like I'll never forget the picture of nurses outside of the hospital. Just after this whole you're killing, don't go anywhere, you're killing the nurses. And then the next day, there's Black Lives Matter rallies going right by the hospital with the nurses outside applauding. You're like, what's going on here? And now CNN won't even play the video of the president taking off his mask at the White House because the guy was like, oh, take it off. That will kill people. A video of the president taking off his mask will kill people? There's a video going around. Actually, play it here. This is
It's my
a funeral.
Privilege to have been asked to conduct our service today to celebrate the life of Alan Wright. I therefore offer you all a very warm welcome as we unite in love and friendship to...
You have to put the chair back, I'm afraid. You can't move the chair to
That woman in the middle is a grieving widow at the funeral of her husband. Her adult son wants to move his chair closer to console his weeping mother. And the funeral home director comes in and tells him to get back. Just 6 feet. George Floyd gets to have a funeral packed with, do we have the picture of it? I'm bad at guessing numbers, but it's over 1,000 people in it, packed inside. I mean, we get the hypocrisy. Like your business shuts down, Nancy Pelosi can go get her hair did without a mask. And somehow that's your fault. She's the victim, you're the, right? But that's all hypocrisy. Whatever, that's fine. Or whatever. It's when it gets into gaslighting that I think is a really sick thing. This is Michelle Obama yesterday.
They're stoking fears about Black and brown Americans, lying about how minorities will destroy the suburbs, whipping up violence and intimidation, and they're pinning it all on what's been an overwhelmingly peaceful movement for racial solidarity. It's true. Research backs it up. Only a tiny fraction of demonstrations have had any violence at all. So what the president is doing is once again patently false. It's morally wrong. And yes, it is racist.
Okay. So, first of all, what kind of sentence is research backs it up? Right? You can't just make a claim, make a ridiculous claim that we're going to get to in a second, and then be like, oh yeah, well, what's your evidence? Oh, well, research backs it up. Okay, like what do you have? Like, what are you talking? Like, oh, well, research. Like, who's the person that's like, oh, okay, thank you. I didn't know research backed it up. Thank you. Like, what is that? Well, how about this claim? Conservatives are whipping up violence. Conservatives are whipping up an overall peaceful movement. A tiny fraction have had any violence at all. I see people are taking that video of her and then putting in the background just cities on fire. A tiny fraction have had any violence at all. Like, what kind of country are we living in where you like, so this is postmodernism. This is really important to understand because the point of it is that you don't even know what's true anymore. The point of postmodernism, we spent a lot of time on 2 + 2 = 5. And the Mathematical Association of America, I think it is, MAA, Mathematical Association of America, they came out, we gotta do a segment on this if we have time, and they said that math is a human construct and humans come in with their own racist biases against people of color. It's like, oh, geez. So 2 + 2 = 5, with the postmodernists, when they say that, they're not saying 2 + 2 does equal 5, because that would be a truth claim and they're against all truth. They're saying 2 + 2 could equal 5. Who's really to say? Could equal 6, could equal 5, could equal 8. What is math anyway? Oh, you use a base 10 number system? Well, if you use a base 6 number system, then it really, right? It's just to muddy the water. That's all they're doing. Does that make sense? They're not saying 2 + 2 = 5. They're saying, well, who's really to know? And the point of that is to muddy the waters and confuse you so much about what is true and what isn't true, to the point where nothing makes sense anymore. I mean, that's that, I keep bringing this up, but that's the Michael Beschloss, presidential historian, tweet the other day. Like, oh, in America, we don't have presidents who get up on balconies. That's for authoritarian countries. And people are just like posting a ton of pictures of every president standing on the balcony of the White House, right? It's to get you to not, like, well, wait, but like, you said it doesn't, and here's every, what are we even, look at this picture from our governor in California. Okay, so that's the picture. The tweet though, the text of the tweet says, going out to eat with members of your household this weekend, don't forget to keep your mask on in between bites. In between bites? What are you? What? You're supposed to chew with your mask on now? This is insane. Yesterday, we talked about how we are a lonely people and how that leads to extremism. We're numb, we are weak, we're delusional, we're gullible. Actually, let's go through the stories we just did. So Jesse said we're fat, rich, and bored. All right, fat, rich, bored, we panic over anything. Okay, so we are, on that point, we're ungrateful. We're ungrateful and we lack perspective. Okay? We panic over a video of Trump taking off his mask. We're cowards. We let a funeral director tell us that we can't console our grieving mom. Are you kidding me? Imagine you in that position. What would you do to that funeral director? Be like, get out of here. Just get. We're weak. Michelle Obama tells the world it's conservatives who are whipping this up. We're gullible. The presidential historian doesn't bother to check to see if any other president has ever been on the White House balcony. We're delusional. And now California says you got to wear your mask between bites when you're eating out with family members. We're pathetic. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a little down on us right now, but are you okay with all this? You okay with this? And then Trump comes out and says, hey, guys, everyone, enough of this. Like, let's be strong. Let's make good decisions. Let's be prudent. But we got to get back to work, and we got to get back to school, and we got to go be with our friends for our mental and spiritual health, and we got to like get back on with life. And he's the bad guy? That's amazing. What an upside down world. I know you're thinking, Slater, hold on. Didn't you do this whole thing on Monday about how you're gonna be more hopeful and optimistic and help us find peace? And here you just called us a bunch of cowards. Here's why I want to share all that. You can't find peace in this world. Like when I realize how much of just how we are just ungrateful and cowardly and weak and gullible and all these things, like it's like a rock bottom to me. It makes me realize like I can't find it in any of these things. You can't. Can't find peace in this world. You better find a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, the wind blew, beat on the house, and it did not fall because it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. We are a country. What we're seeing right now is decades of our culture building its foundation on sand. And here's the fruit of it. That's the result of it. The good news is, and the peace can come with the fact that you can build your house on the rock. True story. Mike Slater, we'll do some VP debate prep coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, to prepare for tonight's VP debate, which again, we're going to have debate coverage starting at 7 o'clock Eastern tonight, and then we'll air the debate at 9 o'clock, and then afterwards we got Jesse Kelly hosting, and Bill O'Reilly is going to join for some post-debate analysis. For some pre-debate analysis, I want to go to one of our favorite guests, David Petruzza, historian, many different books. The most relevant here would be 1960. LBJ versus JFK versus Nixon, the epic campaign that forged 3 presidencies. Mr. Petrugia, how are you, sir?
Good to be back.
Good to talk to you again. So let's start big picture here. So I despise the debates. I'm not going to go off on a whole rant about it, but they have nothing to do with being president. They have nothing to do with any skill sets that have anything to do with anything in life at all. And I hate every single part of them. So that being said, what do you think of them? And why do we do it this way?
They're mislabeled. It's a fake debate. They're not really debates. If you've ever participated in a real debate or judged one, you realize that this moderator stuff really means that we're having 2 joint press conferences. And in a real debate, there would be no interruptions. People would make a case. It would be on one topic, right? Okay. And then you would go back and forth and rejoinder and bang, 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 and summation. So what we have are not really debates. We did have early on in the history of presidential debates. First off, the first one I can find is a real outlier. In 1936, Senator Arthur Vandenberg of Michigan debates a phonograph record of Franklin Roosevelt on CBS radio. CBS radio is aghast at what happens and pulls him off the air. Then in 1948, there is a real debate. It's in Portland, Oregon, the font of all good things. And it's between Harold Stassen and Thomas E. Dewey. And they are debating whether the Communist Party of the United States should be outlawed. And Dewey says, no, we shouldn't. And he wins that debate. And one of the things he says is, look, we have a lot of communists in New York State, and I know how to deal with them, and you deal with them out in the open. And that's really the first debate until 1960. And the first debate in 1960 is not JFK versus Nixon. It's JFK versus Hubert Humphrey in the West Virginia primary. Kennedy wins that, of course, because he's Jack Kennedy. And then there's another debate, which is JFK versus LBJ at the Democratic National Convention. And it's almost completely impromptu. And Kennedy wins that, really skewers LBJ at that. And then we get into the format that we know today, which is Kennedy versus Nixon. They had 4 debates back then. And in 1960, as in 2020, we've got a candidate who's taken sick. Nixon is campaigning in every state in the union. He's made a promise he's going to campaign in all 50 states. And he bangs his knee on a car door in Greensboro, North Carolina, takes sick, and is in the hospital for 2 weeks. Rushes out to catch up on his 2 weeks, a hole in his schedule, right? And he's sick. He's lost 10 pounds, and he looks like hell. And his clothes are hanging on him. You see a little bit of this in Biden now, where his clothes look too loose on him. He's lost weight too. And then so Nixon rushes into Chicago, doesn't rest up. Kennedy rests up. One of the ironies in that campaign is Nixon was always healthy, and he's sick in that campaign, and JFK is always sick until that year. But Kennedy makes the smart move. He preps for the debate. He takes it seriously. He's in a hotel room in Chicago a couple days before, taking it easy, and he looks great. And Nixon does not. And now we talk about the venues for debates and where people are shields and this and that. And so one of the arguments, and everyone's got handlers now. Well, they had handlers then. Nixon, if you're old enough to remember, really sweat. And he sweat like crazy in those debates. He was very sensitive to heat. So they would have the battle of the thermostats. And the Kennedy people were turning up the heat, literally, on Nixon every debate. And Nixon people would go back and grab the thermostat and crank it down. But also in the third debate, what you get is the split venue. There was a scheduling problem for some reason, and they're not in the same room. They're not in the same time zone. Kennedy is in New York, and Nixon is in Los Angeles. So we've been there before on this, where we might have to do the same thing again if we do have another debate between Biden and Trump, that they don't have to be in the same room.
Yeah. How did that
And
how
you
did
don't
that go
need
in
studio
1960?
audiences either.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many dynamics here. Technologically, did that go smoothly back in
It went
1960?
smoothly, but it wasn't, it loses something. It loses something in the aura of the whole thing. But it worked. It worked.
So here's my question to go back to history even prior to this. Is the fact that what these things have become is just a regurgitation of 1 minute talking points, what is that a reflection of? Is that a reflection of the American people? Is that a reflection of the quality of the intellect of the candidates? Is that a reflection of the big media that we got to fit now 1,000 topics into a short period of time to get our commercial breaks in? What is the result? What has caused this downfall in quality?
I think the quality of the civilization has caused the downfall. Things are bad all over. But politics has always been artifice and the creation of images. Take a look at that debate between W and Gore, where Gore really gets in W's face and goes over, and he's really smarmy and obnoxious, and it blows up. It does not work for him, but they had discussed doing it. And his handler said, no, don't do it. It's not going to work.
Wow.
But he does it anyway. And so many of these things are prepared, and you're waiting, for the sound bite. You want that to work, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But the Lincoln Douglas debates, which were not presidential, which were the Senate in Illinois, and which is kind of odd because they didn't have a popular vote for the Senate in Illinois in the 1850s. Those things go on for hours and hours and hours, and there's a ton of them. So things were more long form then. You go back to the old time newspapers, and they would print the entire text of presidential speeches and of the big major speeches, so people could look at them unfiltered. They'd get their opinion from the columnists then, but right now everything is the media attacking the media about who said what and blah 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 blah. It goes on. So the substance really gets lost as to in the minutia and the woulda, coulda, shoulda stuff.
Yeah, we're always looking for that prepared a moment soundbite attack. And as you said, and I think that's awful. But we did a story the other day, Reagan's line about I will not make age a part of this campaign, that was rehearsed. And what was the other one? Oh, you're no Jack Kennedy, that was rehearsed.
Yeah.
So all these big debate moments, none of them were impromptu. And so here's my question, David. Do I romanticize the past too much? I have this, I'm putting these guys who were running for office 100 years ago plus on this pedestal of they were great orators and they were great debaters and they could actually listen to the person who was talking and form a new argument on the fly based on the moment. Or were they always just sort of the same and not really that smart of people?
It varies. I mean, you had some real political hacks back then, even and crooks. Yeah. One of the reasons why they went to direct election of U.S. senators is because a lot of bribery was involved in these things. So, in 1920, when I wrote my book on the 1920 election, I dedicated it to the folly of man and the mercy of God, because people were not exactly perfect then either.
Yeah, I like that. What is one thing you would change format-wise of these debates that you think would make the biggest difference?
I think get the moderators out of the way and get the press conference out of the way and just sort of let them talk for 10 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever and have a real debate, have some real substance, see if they can string a whole bunch of sentences and ideas together, okay? because we're electing them for 4 years, And that's
not a high bar. I love how your bar is, let's see if they can put some sentences together, right? You're not asking for Cicero to get up there or Demosthenes to give a 3-hour presentation. What would you say, and I love you're always a wealth of this history stuff, obviously. What's and you brought up the Nixon as a really fascinating parallel, but is there any other parallel in history to what's going on right now? And I'll tell you this, David, one thing we've been trying to focus more on the show is to try to get better at perspective, because I think perspective gives us peace, because there's nothing new under the sun. We've been here before, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, any other moment in our history that this reminds you of? What if David comes back and says, no, this is totally unique and things have never been worse?
And really to the Civil War. I mean, not to be too
that's
dramatic
not what I was
about it, but
looking
we've
for,
never
David.
been so divided. You have to go way, way back where people just cannot stand each other anymore and are not willing to cut anyone any slack or half the time even to work within the system. It's frightening, I'll tell you.
So is that really different than the 60s? Because I would argue that the 60s would be another time that was
because you had a system of stability back then within the two parties, and they were used to power going back and forth, and the challenge to the system then was in the streets, and there were still people willing to say, okay, we're the adults in the room. You have to have some rules. You have to have some basis based on our civilization and our government, which has gone before, our constitutional system. And here you've got the mayors and the governors really abdicating responsibility one after another, or conversely, assuming too much responsibility. We've got two dynamics going on at once. In Portland and Chicago and Washington, D.C. with the riots, it's like, we're not going to do anything. All of a sudden, these mayors and governors are super libertarians. We're not going to enforce any laws. And then on the other hand, you've got governors like Cuomo and Michigan saying, we've got executive orders. We don't need no stinking laws. We don't need no stinking legislatures. We can just say whatever we want, and you will do what we say. So you've got two contradictory dynamics going at the same time.
Not the piece I was looking for, David. Thanks a lot, but no, we got to run. We got to run, David. Can we talk maybe again next week? I'd love to get your insight on the media and how the media's evolved, changed, devolved over time.
Okay.
When it comes to all this stuff, but we'll have to do that another day. Among other books, the most relevant here, 1960, LBJ, JFK, Nixon, the epic campaign that forged 3 presidencies by the great David Pietrusza. David, appreciate your time as always, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. Again, debate coverage tonight starts at 7, 9 o'clock Eastern. We're going to air it, of course, right here. And then we'll have post-debate analysis, Jesse Kelly with Bill O'Reilly. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to talk to the author of a new book called The Biden Deception, Moderate, Opportunist, or the Democrats' Crypto Socialist. And specifically, I want to talk about his new editorial in The American Spectator, where he's a senior editor. Secularism Lives Loudly Within Biden. George Neumeier. Mr. Neumeier, how are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about this secularism lives loudly within Biden. Obviously, that's a play on what was it? The dogma lives loudly within you from Feinstein against Amy Barrett in the last court confirmation process. What do you mean by secularism? How do you define that in this context?
Well, according to Biden, the government has the right to suppress religious freedom when it conflicts with the goals of liberalism. And so, he's written on his campaign website that the religious freedom should be viewed in a limited way. It shouldn't be, it can't be a pretext for doing something that liberalism regards as discriminatory. And so that's basically Biden's way of saying if religion conflicts with the goals of liberalism, i.e. abortion rights and LGBT rights, he is going to suppress religious freedom. And we saw that under Barack Obama with the contraceptive mandate contained within Obamacare, which resulted in that lawsuit involving the Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious groups. And Biden has said that he is going to resume that harassment of the Little Sisters of the Poor. And that's just one of many examples of how he's going to undermine religious freedom as president.
It's amazing how when that all happened, it was literally like almost comically the Little Sisters of the Poor that they were going at. Like you could not come up with a more like it was like a better name than that, being the people that they're, in your words, harassing. I think the Little Sisters of the Poor. Geez, Biden. So what does that say about the Democratic Party that liberalism or progressivism or their political ideology is of higher importance and higher priority than Christianity?
Well, I mean, it shows that they have a very ahistorical view of the Constitution. They don't interpret the First Amendment as the Founding Fathers did. You know, they're willing to turn the First Amendment on its head, basically. It was established to protect the religious, not to remove the religious from public life. And yet that's how Joe Biden views it.
Such an important line. It was designed to protect the religious. Give me a little more on that. That's so important because I want to make sure people have that proper worldview and perspective as they move forward here. Can you go more into that?
Yeah, well, the First Amendment basically said that the federal government can't establish its own religion, and that means that it can't establish a religion of secularism either, which would swoop down and suppress religious activity within the states. It was actually, the states, the 13 states, wouldn't agree to the Constitution until the federal government made it clear that they weren't going to come in and prevent religious activity within the states. So that was the original understanding of the First Amendment. It was a protection for the religious, not a justification for removing religion from public life completely and making the government purely secular.
Yeah, every colony had their own official religion at the time, and I encourage everyone to go back and read the letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury, Connecticut Baptists, I believe it was, which is where the line separation of church and state really comes from, which is everything you're just talking about here. It's to protect the Baptists from practicing their religion, not to prevent the Baptists from practicing their religion.
Right.
George, let's go big picture here about Biden. I was reading an article in Politico the other day, and it talked about Biden, the old school, consensus building, moderate guy. Was that true? Is that still true today?
It's certainly not true anymore. I would say that, Biden has always been an opportunist. He follows the party wherever it goes. And so in the 1990s, when the party under Bill Clinton was trying to triangulate the Republicans, he was more moderate. He was following the party line at that time. And it was out of that attempt to triangulate the Republicans that crime bill, which Biden sponsored, came to be. And but then as the party, more recently moved to the hard left, he joined them on the hard left. He followed them to the hard left. And now it's impossible for him to present himself as a moderate. He is clearly a tool of the far left. He selected as his running mate, which we'll see tonight at the VP debate, the most liberal member of the Senate, Kamala Harris. And, if he had wanted to move to the center in the general election, he certainly wouldn't have selected her.
Yeah, what's one thing we need to know about Joe Biden today, right? Because again, we can reflect on Joe Biden from the 70s, but what's the Joe Biden of today that you think is most important to know?
Well, I think it's, his commitment to what Obama called the fundamental transformation of the country. Biden has said that he wants to complete Obama's fundamental transformation of the country. And I think that that's, basically a pledge to pursue a course that is unconstitutional and that seeks to establish a new political order based upon left-wing radicalism. And I think that's, the most concerning thing about Biden is that he's committed to that project, that left-wing project to undo the foundations of the country and replace them with the politics of the Democratic Party.
And we'll see that again, as you said, tonight with Kamala. The Biden deception, moderate opportunist, or the Democrats' crypto socialist. What's a crypto socialist?
It's a hidden socialist. It's somebody who doesn't advertise their socialism explicitly, but nevertheless subscribes to it. And I would say that that's obvious most evidently in Biden's philosophy of taxation, which is basically that he sees it as an instrument of social justice, when in reality, taxation is merely the government's right to take money from the people who form the government in order to finance the legitimate activities of the government. That's the real purpose of taxation, is to fund the legitimate functions of the federal government. It's not to, quote unquote, redistribute wealth. And yet that is the purpose of taxation, which Biden has signed on to. And in that way, he's exactly like Bernie Sanders. They're both socialist redistributionists at heart.
What's one example of his social justice redistribution for Biden?
Well, he said that, we have plenty of money to spread around, as if that's the purpose of government, or that's the purpose of taxation, is to spread money around. It's like what Obama said to Joe the plumber. We've got plenty of wealth to spread around. Well, that is not the founding fathers' understanding of government's rationale for taxing people. The government has no right to take any money from people more than what is required to fund the government.
What a great reference to Joe the plumber. I haven't thought we talked about Ken Bone the other day, and now we bring in Joe the plumber. George Neumeyer from the American Spectator and the book, again, The Biden Deception. George, great to talk to you. Thank you, sir.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day. Yeah, true story. Mike Slater. We'll be back tomorrow. We have, again, debate coverage starts tonight, 7 o'clock, right here on The First. We're going to air the debate, of course, at 9 o'clock, and then we'll have post-debate analysis. Stick around here for the great Jesse Kelly, who's going to be joined by the even greater Bill O'Reilly. It's all coming up tonight right here in The First, and we'll be back, of course, with the highlights on tomorrow's show. True story, spread the word.